Good evening, everyone. Happy Sabbath. Thank you for joining us this Friday. As the sun is going down, I can already gather and imagine that some of you are just now getting home and enjoying some family time. And as we begin, I just want to give you a warm welcome and say that today is special because we are using this Vespers time as a moment for us to come together and usher a new culture into our church, one of acceptance, of inclusion. And as we ended our Wednesday night prayer meeting for youth and young adult, we were tackling this topic of more than a hashtag, where we were speaking to this verse found in Micah chapter 6, verse 8, that says that God requires us to act justly and to love mercy and to love and to walk humbly. And when we discussed these things, we wanted to know how we could do that tangibly today and right now in our world and with our current social climate. And as we begin to dialogue, there were just certain things that we couldn't fathom. And we decided to invite our guest here tonight. You'll see him a little bit later, Michael Nixon. He is the VP for Diversity and Inclusion at Andrews University. And we wanted him to come out because we wanted to go beyond just doing things. And if you're not aware, our young people have been writing letters to our representatives, have been going to different rallies and different events from other churches that speak towards this topic of social justice. And as we begin tonight, I don't know where you are, I don't know where you're watching from, but it's so wonderful, as we've mentioned in previous weeks, to be able to be in a place where we can worship God and call it church. And as we begin our church time together, as we begin to worship God together, I want to invite you to sing with me, and really the praise team here. Just a couple of songs as we start off our Sabbath, and the first being God of the Hills and Valleys. And when you just take a moment to think about these words, because when times are tough, and especially now that we feel alone because we don't have that interaction with people, this song just really speaks to how God is still in control. God is still the God of the hills and the valleys. No matter what moment you may be going through tonight, I can guarantee, and God through his scripture guarantees, that he is with you.
Among the sun, you wipe my tears away, and I feel the pain of heartbreak, and I've seen the brighter days, and I pray prayers to heaven from my lowest place, and I have held the blessings God you give and take away. No matter what I have, your grace is enough. No matter where I am, I'm standing in your love. On the mountains I will bow my life to the one who sets me there. In the valley I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountain, I didn't get there on my own. When I'm walking through the valley, I know I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, hills and valleys, God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone. I watch my dreams get broken. In you I hope again. No matter what, I know I'm safe inside your hands. On the mountains I will bow my life to the one who set me there. In the valley I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountain, you give and take away every joy and every pain. Through it all you will remain. Over it all. On the mountains I will bow my eyes. Yeah. In the valley I will lift my eyes. Oh, in the mountains I will bow my life to the one who set me there. In the valley I will lift my eyes to the one who sees me there. When I'm standing on the mountain I didn't get there on my own. When I'm walking through the valley I know I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, hills and valleys, God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone. You're God of the hills and valleys, hills and valleys, God of the hills, and I am not alone. God of the hills, God of the valleys, you're God of the hills and valleys, and I am not alone.
Awesome. As we are seeking, to have a little bit of, friendships over, virtually and over social media, a quick shout out to our lead pastor, Lafitte Cortez. He is with his wife, Linda, over at St. Augustine. They're celebrating their 25th year anniversary, and wow, that's something I guess that I need to aspire to. Nani makes it easy for me, of course. And so wherever you are, we want to say welcome and thank you for joining us as we continue to worship one more song before we get into our discussion for the night.
I'm so confused. I know I heard you loud and clear, so I followed through. Somehow I ended up here. I don't wanna think, I may never understand that my broken heart is a part of your plan. When I try to pray, all I got is hurt and these 4 words. Thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be done. It's hard to count it all joy, distracted by the noise, just trying to make sense of all your promises. Sometimes I gotta stop, remember that you're God and I am not. So thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will be down like a child on my knees. All that comes to me is thy will be done, thy will be done, thy will. I know you see me, I know you hear me, Lord. Your plans are for me, goodness you have in store. I know you hear me, I know you see me, Lord. Your plans are for me, goodness you have in store. So thy will be
Yeah, it's a powerful song, especially when we think about what um, the issues that we're going through right now, and that's something that young people here at Miami Temple and other churches that have joined us through this series have kind of struggled with um, is dealing with this will of God and seeing things so tumultuous around us. And so that's why we're here with Michael. I'm going to go ahead and invite Michael onto the stream. And Mike, welcome, man. I know you have
Brian.
all the answers, but we know you have a lot of them, right? Um, Mike, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, and to cap it off, just tell us something that most people don't know about Michael Timothy Nixon.
Wow. Okay, that's a big one. Well, first of all, Brian, it's good to be with you, my brother. This is bringing back warm memories to, well, not warm memories, maybe cooler weather memories of you
Right.
and Nani being up here with us at Andrews. But just excited to be here with you tonight, and excited about everything you and your team are doing over at Miami Temple. It looks real exciting, and so just super proud of you, bro, and just glad to be here with you. So I'm Michael Nixon. I serve here at Andrews University, as Brian said, as the VP for Diversity and Inclusion. And just I've been doing that for the past 3 years. Getting ready to start my 4th year, which is pretty crazy to think about. But one, I guess, thing that most folks don't know about me. Okay, this is a pretty good one. I think you'll like this one, Brian. So I know you know this, Brian, but maybe not all of your viewers or church members know. Actually, my first year of undergrad in college, I went to Antillean in Puerto Rico. Of course, that's where you went as well. So shout out to UAA. And that was well, I'm not going to say when it was. I don't want to date myself, but it was a few years ago. And so something completely random that I did while I was there is I made the very impulsive and somewhat crazy decision to sign up to play semi-professional football as in like American football, not football.
Right.
And so while we were down there, it was pretty crazy. Me and some friends of mine actually went to we were going to the campus of, the room in Mayaguez, where they have these outdoor basketball courts. We were going to play basketball, actually, and we saw some people playing football. And I guess I'm somewhat tall, and some of my friends are as well. I see my friend Brendan is in here. Brendan Albury. He was one of the guys who was with me. They kind of saw us and said, "Hey, you guys want to play football?" And we were like, "Yeah, sure." We thought that the Mayaguez Chargers. Oh my goodness, Brendan remembers the name. And and a couple of us were like a lot more excited than others. Like I was kind of on the fence about it, but it was about 6 or 7 of us, and everybody's getting hype. And so I was kind of like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." Needless to say, I lasted on the team maybe 1 week. The first time we actually wore pads was right before our first game. We were practicing without pads. I mean, it was really crazy. But it was one of those things you do kind of like when you're young, just to kind of have an adventure. And it surely was an adventure for sure. So most people don't know that. I don't tell that story often. So you're getting an exclusive.
Oh, I love that, man. I love that because, though we're virtual, like last week I was doing this, Mike, I was doing this from my sister's spare bedroom. I was sitting on the floor and I was here on my computer doing what we're doing here. The week before when we did this, I was at home, and now I'm in the church office. And I love that you're sharing that story with us, because it just gives us an opportunity to be genuinely open and sharing what our experiences were, even as younger people, right? And it allows us to have just some friendship, some relationship building, even though we're doing this virtually.
Sure.
And I wanted to ask, just very quickly, because there are some people that may not know you. What was your trajectory like to professionally to become the vice president there at Andrews University?
Yeah, for sure. So it was really unexpected. You know what I mean? This was one of those opportunities that I did not see coming at all. I didn't plan for it. I didn't try to set myself up for it. But it truly, I don't want to over spiritualize it because, you know, sometimes people will jump on here and say, you know, God opened up the door and I just walked through it. But that is essentially what happened. But before that, the story I just shared with you, I was 18 years old at the time. So a bit ago, I finished up undergrad. I actually ended up finishing up here at Andrews, did my bachelor's degree in political science. After that, I went to law school in Chicago, Illinois at UIC, John Marshall Law School, finished up there. Then, you know, right as I was finishing law school, got married to my wife, Pastor Tatiana Nixon. She accepted a call to New Jersey to pastor a church, associate pastor first, and then ended up becoming the senior pastor of the Princeton SDA church, not far from Princeton, University's campus there in Jersey. And that was an interesting move for me because, I kind of took a leap of faith because, we initially had a plan to start off our professional careers in the Chicago, Illinois area. She had some potential prospects with some things. I had a job offer, but this offer and opportunity for her to become the first woman pastor in that conference really came out of nowhere. And I didn't have anything set up. I didn't know anyone out in that area. And so we took a leap of faith and we went out there and stay with me. There's a reason why I'm sharing this. I didn't even plan to share this actually. And so we get over there to Jersey and, I had been studying for the Illinois bar, but I shifted to start studying for the New York bar exam. For those that know, you have to pass that test in order to get a legal job. And so studied for it and took the test actually like a week or two before we got married. But then a few months later, because it takes some months to get your results, I actually found out that I didn't pass. And so again, we're newlyweds. I don't have like a firm job in my career. And now I have to study to take this test again because I didn't pass, which, and just a word to the wise for those who are watching, don't ever plan to take the bar exam the same summer that you're getting married. Just don't do it. It's a really bad idea.
It's a good excuse to get out of the planning, right?
Yeah, that's what I did. But at the same time, I can take no credit for anything that happened in the ceremony. But just the stressors and pressures of, the lead up to getting married, it just wasn't a good mix for me. And so I was really at a crossroads personally and professionally where, I couldn't really use my law degree yet because I hadn't passed the bar. No law firm was going to hire me without having passed. And so I actually took a retail job. I started selling suits because I couldn't, I had some temporary jobs here and there, but I wanted to find some sort of steady source of income. And I ended up selling suits, working in a suit shop. And it was really, it was a humbling experience for sure. I was definitely very bitter. I asked God many times, why me, why this, and all these different things. But that about 6 to 7 month period of doing that was really transformational for me. I really shifted my perspective on just life and what it means to be a man, because we have all these ideas of what we have to do to provide. And, we shape a lot of our manhood as men around our career and what we do and these kinds of things. And so I had to really clear the tables of a lot of those assumptions and say, hey, I'm making an honest living. I'm not bringing a lot to the table, but I'm bringing something to the table. I'm still able to, study to take the test again. And, at some point this will work out. And so took the exam again in February now of 2014. And then 2-3 months after that, by God's grace, found out that I passed. And so this is now like in May going into June, but I still didn't have a legal job. And so I was thinking about what to do. And Tatiana actually suggested that I would offer myself as a volunteer, just say, hey, maybe just try working for free for a little bit and see what happens. So I reached out to the Fair Housing Justice Center in New York City because I had a background in fair housing from law school, and basically said, hey, just passed the bar. If you need an attorney to just volunteer some time, I'll be willing to do that. And so the man who became my boss, Fred Freiberg, he actually responded to me like maybe 20 minutes later and said, hey, we actually do have a big need if you are willing to work for free. Not many people are because we're a nonprofit. We don't have a lot of funds. We'd love to have you. So for the next about 3-4 months, that's what I did. I worked on a volunteer basis 2 to 3 days a week. I worked part-time still selling suits just to make money, enough money to, take New Jersey Transit. Those who've been out in that area knows how expensive that could be, to just be able to take, MTA and Jersey Transit. And then by God's grace, in October of that year, they got an influx of funding through a grant. And I was able to interview for a permanent position and get hired. And so they brought me on as their legal coordinator, staff attorney. And I did that for 3 years. And it was that advocacy work, that civil rights work that actually gave me, I think, the profile to be competitive to apply for the job that I ended up applying for here at Andrews in 2017 after they created this position. And so I share all that to say, oftentimes we share the highlights and, things look really nice in our bio, but I am grateful for the opportunity that I had to sell suits for, 6 to 8 months with men that were probably 2 times, sometimes 3 times my age, that some of them I'm still in touch with. Howard Kravitz, I'll shout him out, is one of my good friends. I talk to him at least, once a month. He's a Jewish guy from South Philly in his 70s. And I would have never in a perfect world, I would have never made a connection with someone like that had I not just said, you know what, this sucks. It's not exactly what I went to school to do, but I'm going to do what I have to do right now until God opens up the doors that are necessary for me to get to where I need to be. So I've had a lot of scholastic training that has helped to equip me to do what I'm doing now. But I look back at those moments as being some of the most foundational and informative for me in preparing me to do this work that I'm doing at Andrews now.
I love that. Thanks. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Before we continue into, I would say the meat of tonight, right? This idea of a justice-driven vision. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer here, Mike, and we'll get into it. Heavenly Father and God, thank you for the opportunity to have an open conversation like this where Michael, with his experiences, can just share some aspects of life that perhaps we are blinded to. And so as a church, may we take this knowledge and be able to run with it. May we be able to minister and do a job that is more genuinely empathetic towards those that perhaps we consider less than ourselves. We ask these things, God, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Mike, I love this, man. So real quick, I came to Andrews August 2017, I believe. And I don't know at what time, like you started in your position.
It was like a month before that. It was like the beginning of July 2017. Yep.
Okay, sweet. And so, wow. And so coming in there, I didn't know much, but my second year there, and I specifically thought about you because you took upon your shoulders this whole idea of vertical, right? Mm-hmm. And just helping out the second and third generation Hispanic within Andrews that perhaps didn't have a place to belong, at least not the graduate students, Mm-hmm. And so we were able to partner up with that, and you really just supplied everything for that to happen. And I want to ask you, coming in, because I'm sure the interview process was was very specific and very, I want to say, tiresome. Uh,
Mhm.
and I want to ask, like, what was your vision coming in to Andrews University, a campus that had never had someone at your position, at your level before, and that they were seeking, genuinely seeking, someone to be able to provide safe spaces for the 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 communities of marginalized people?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and thanks for asking it. And so, um, what I'd say initially is one of the things that I think helped me stepping into the um, the interview process for this position, because I should also mention that I did spend a good amount of my upbringing in this community as well. I moved. My dad's a minister, Dr. Timothy Nixon, and he started his ministry in upstate New York. And that's where I was born. We then moved to Southern California. That's where my sister was born. We moved back across the country to the Washington, D.C., DMV area. Then in 1998, when I was going into the sixth grade, we moved here to Andrews, and he became the administrative chaplain here at Andrews, and he served in that position from 98 until 2013. And so being able to sort of be in the community for that amount of time, to also really kind of, hear some of his, trials and tribulations of being a Black chaplain on this campus and everything that's involved with that, and some of the discussions that have been had in our community and on our campus dating back to then, I think gave me a very particular context to how to potentially approach this work at Andrews. And so the first thing, and I think the most foundational thing that I did, was I looked at our institution's mission and vision. And that is to seek knowledge, to empower students to seek knowledge, affirm faith, and then change the world. And so my approach to that was, because there was some great language in there with each of the seek, affirm, change components of the institution's vision. They had like 4 to 5 bullet points of like action steps to live that out. And a lot of those action steps actually, basically when shaped and tweaked to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, really, develops a powerful narrative for how to pursue the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus. And so essentially, what I did before interviewing was I did some pretty intentional work on understanding the university's mission and vision. What are the values, and how can those things be framed within a DEI framework? Having done some reading up from some experts on diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education. So sort of, marrying those concepts together with our university's mission and vision, because the only way that this work really can work ultimately in any particular context is if it's embedded within the institution's mission. So essentially, what I sat and said to them was that we cannot accomplish the outcomes of the seek, affirm, change without intentionally embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just painting that picture for them, which I'd like to believe, was a somewhat compelling narrative, which led to them really being interested in partnering with them to move forward. But I'll also say that the process that led to them creating the position, the It Is Time movement that happened in the semester before I came to campus, which, maybe lots of folks have heard of already, was very powerful and moving for me to observe from afar. First, the students who made their public service announcement video, and then the university's response, and all of the work that they started doing after that, and the conversations that were hosted and things of that nature, really had a profound impact on me and inspired me. So even actually before I had even applied for the job, I kept sort of thinking about the job. It just kept coming up in my head. I'd be doing my, my work in New York, which I loved, and I still love the work of fair housing. I would just start getting ideas about what it could look like. And of course, I know now that was God really speaking to me and giving me his vision for what the work could look like. And so I'll be honest, and I still have this document on my computer, and I use it often as we're crafting and continuing to craft our strategic vision for campus. I walked into that interview with a 18-page document that was literally a proposed strategic vision for what it could look like. And they didn't ask for me to do that. I didn't expect to be able to create that, but literally God was just pouring ideas into my head. And of course, I was doing some reading and research. And as I was doing that, God just kept giving me things. And so I walked in there with copies of that. And I could even sort of tell at that moment, I've never really shared this, but as I was explaining, what was in the document to them, just kind of seeing how they reacted to it, I had a good feeling that, I'd hear back from them, and so I just praise God that he gave me that insight. I had some great mentors that I talked to beforehand that really helped me as well, folks who were doing this work in other sectors, and some folks who were doing DEI work in higher education. I leaned on them a lot as well, because I think in crafting vision, it's good to hear from folks who are further along in their vision as you're trying to craft yours. So yeah, that was a really, I think, formative and inspiring process. And I go back to that often to remember why I'm doing the work I'm doing.
I love that, Michael, because I've been listening to a lot of like leadership podcasts, and a lot of times this whole vision process comes up, and they tend to always say that it starts when you write it down on paper. If you don't have it written down, you don't have it,
Yeah.
and something, I guess to kind of point out a few questions here, because just going through this series with these young people, and not all of them are here from Miami Temple. They're from other churches as well. Of course, you and I, we can speak from positions of authority, paid positions of authority, right? That we're provided with that voice. But others, in just regular church members, when they have like this vision, right, that the church has of how to live, right, Christianity, we have our 28 fundamental beliefs and whatnot. When we take a look at, these documents with several pages, right, of what it ought to be like, I have this question here that I want to go ahead and ask you, because we went along and we have done a lot this month. We have done a lot to kind of have that sense, that feeling of what it's like to do something, not just like share a post or a publication by someone else, but hey, I'm a part of this too. I'm doing something. But so often it happens that especially within Adventism, that we do, but we never establish something long-term, a vision long-term. And so doing makes us tired, and then we just stop. And so, this whole justice-driven vision, we want to be able to have one so that we can keep moving forward, Mike. And so I love what you just shared. And this is a question that is brought up, and I shared this with you earlier on. What is something that we can do to request or require change in our leadership? And this is not necessarily a change that requires the person to be changed out of that leadership role, but require that person themselves to change, like to change their language or their actions, or how they exercise their power or influence over others and over situations. And just to give a little bit of context, this is coming from a place of what has been occurring, as of late in Southern University. You are well aware. And also, some local churches that are either staying away from this topic of social justice, or addressing it from a place of ignorance. And so having these clear and detailed values and beliefs, as we do in Adventism, how can we kind of buy into that, or how can we make that actually tangible today, going beyond just what's on paper. But you get what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's good, and so I think in regards to leadership, I mean that's a really good question. So, what I think that I'll just speak directly, I guess maybe to leaders. What I think is really important, and it's a pretty low it's a pretty low bar to start with, I think, is to, you know, if you don't have sort of a context for what's going on right now, as it pertains to, you know, social justice, Black Lives Matter, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, it's okay if that's the case, but it's not okay to stay there. Like, I think that's the point. You know what I mean? I think that what I think that what most, church members and things of that nature who have a passion for these discussions are asking for is really at a foundational level just an openness to be teachable, as a leader, to listen, to be a servant leader. And if we've truly embraced the ideals of servant leadership, because I think it does sort of start with what is our frame for leadership, and how are we training and equipping even future leaders. So I think another thing that our leaders need to be doing is how are we identifying, persons in Generation Z, millennials. I mean, I guess they're calling millennials aging now. I'm a millennial, but uh, you know, folks in those generations that we can empower to lead from their context, and not to say, in order to lead, you have to do this, or you have to subscribe to this particular mindset or attitudes or behaviors. No, how can we understand and see the things that are important or that you have a passion for, and how can we help you to channel that passion into future leadership within our church institution? Because if you snuff out the passion for leadership, then you're going to get people who are leading who aren't always passionate about what they're doing, because we've removed that from the requirements to lead. And so what I think that folks can do to advocate for change is to essentially say, look, we want our voices to be heard. We want we can no longer accept, the complicit silence, because I think that's another aspect of what's really challenging in this area. Oftentimes, is that it's either we don't know what to say, or we don't want to say what we're really thinking, because what we're really thinking is probably something we shouldn't be thinking as leaders. And so we just end up not saying anything, or, saying the wrong thing. And I think that sometimes it's maybe important to just kind of understand the moment that we're in our country and in our world's history. We have institutions like NASCAR saying Black Lives Matter. Anyone who knows anything about NASCAR knows that hasn't been the safest place for,
Right.
Black lives, or, Confederate flags and racial slurs, is just like a regular Monday at a NASCAR track, and so to see, so this is the other thing that I'll say. I think that we need to, at some point, start understanding and recognizing that these barriers that we've drawn between the secular and the sacred are much more blurred than we'd care to admit.
What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is we have these ideas of, these are the sacred hours of the Sabbath that we're getting ready to go into, right? And I obviously believe in the sacredness of the Sabbath, and we need to keep it. It of course was made for man, and it was made for humans, and humans were not made for the Sabbath. So keep that in mind as well. And so particularly as Adventists, like, for example, so think of it from that, frame of mind. There are these things that we feel are acceptable to do on Sabbath, and then, after Sabbath is done, we could do all those other things, right?
Right.
And so you're kind of conditioned to have that sort of a belief. And I think that in the same way, in our everyday lives, we're conditioned to believe that, as a Christian, there are certain things that are secular, that's worldly, and we shouldn't have our hands on that. We shouldn't engage with that. And there are other things that are sacred and that are acceptable for us to engage with. And I believe that in the life of a Christian, to the extent that there's an area where the gospel is not being uplifted or preached, that's not a call for us to disengage. That's actually a call for us to engage more. I mean, I think one of the powerful things about the civil rights movement, and Dr. King is on the shirt that I'm wearing right now, is that Dr. King did not say, oh, the civil rights movement is full of, Black nationalists and, secularists and all this different type of stuff. And I'm a Baptist minister, and I'm just going to preach the gospel and focus on the sacred, because all of that stuff is too political, and I'm not going to engage with that. If Dr. King and, John Lewis, who just passed away, God rest his soul, C.T. Vivian, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, who are still with us, so many, Rosa Parks, so many others who engaged in that work from a Christian frame, if they said, oh, that's too political, I'm not going to, engage with that, then we wouldn't have a Civil Rights Act. We wouldn't have a Voting Rights Act. We wouldn't have a Fair Housing Act. We'd have no civil rights legislation. We'd still be living in a segregated America, because, Christians had said, oh, it's too political to engage with that. Let's just focus on heavenly things. No, Jesus came to this earth and said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And the kingdom of heaven does not have borders that can't stretch out into any area of this country or this world. No, we've been called to bring the ethics of that kingdom, which are ethics of justice, mercy, and humility, everywhere we go in this country, in this world, and anywhere that we see that folks are not being treated as image bearers, or with the value that image bearers should be treated with, then we've been called to raise our voices up in response to that. We have an obligation to do so. And so that's what I think we need from our leaders, in a nutshell. I've said a lot there. And it's going to look different for everyone. Not everybody's Martin Luther King. I'm certainly not. And so, you don't have to preach the I Have a Dream speech or whatever the case may be, but listen to your young people, or listen to your people from all generations, because it's not just our young people that are awakening to this. Make space for this intentional conversation, and then talk about how you can take tangible action steps forward.
Yeah, man, I love that. And to your point, when Jesus was here, he broke, social standards left and right. And, and on top of that, what comes to mind is this text from the prophet where he says, you are going to be taken captive to Babylon, and when you go, make sure that you are successful there, and that you make families there, that you marry there, and you have a life there. And when you think about those things, they couldn't do that without engaging in the Babylonian society, and yet we expect to be a successful movement without engaging with the world. And so I love that you mentioned that. I love it. And just to add to that question, you brought up this this language of segregation, right? It seems like that segregation is still maybe not as forward in Adventism, but you can see it through the separation of conferences, right? Where you have a Black conference for for every other conference, right?
Mhm.
And when we think about that, you know, and we talk about diversity and inclusion, the question comes up is like, why aren't we one conference, right? And so Florida here, we have two, and it's like, why isn't it just one Florida conference? And the question is, you know, if we come together as one body, would that actually benefit this idea of diversity and inclusion for Black people as well?
No, it's an important question, I think. And so so the first thing that I would say, and you know, I do have to I have to concede that you know, the North American division actually had a discussion on this, and they were talking about the fact that as it stands now, there's actually a decent amount of diversity across both state and regional conferences. So it's not sort of the same racial divide as there was historically when, you know, in the early 1940s, the General Conference made the decision at that time to segregate the church, and establish at that time what they called colored conferences, and they became regional conferences later. But with that being said, there still does remain this structural divide. And so I think in approaching, you know, conversations around that divide, it's important for us to consider at the beginning of that discussion that any conversation around what we do next on how we're structured has to start with looking at why that structure was created at its inception. You know, if we're just kind of looking at the optics of it here, you know, years later, that'll give us one context on it. But if we kind of reverse back and look at, okay, what was happening at the time? Why was this done? And with that being said, and with that in mind, what should we do now? I think that's a better starting point for the conversation. And so to start, it's important to understand that regional conferences, at the time colored conferences, were not created because Black people wanted their own separate Black conferences. That's not why the General Conference made that decision. Colored conferences, Black conferences were created actually, in fact, because the General Conference wanted to maintain white conferences. And so they said, because Black leadership were asking to join just the regular church denomination. I mean, we had various state conferences at the time, and Black leaders and pastors were asking to be recognized as a part of the official, you know, makeup of the church, and they kept being told no. And then after being told no over so many years, they pivoted to say, well, since you won't allow us inclusion into the current church system, will you create a separate system? Because, of course, at that time, you know, segregation in the country at large, at least in the South, was still very real. And so they sort of used that model to say, well, would you establish us separately so that we can just be recognized as Adventist Christians, you know?
Wow.
And so that's why it ultimately ended up being created in the 40s. And when it was being created, many of the folks in leadership who were pretty much exclusively white and male, for context, said that, you know, this is going to fail and you all will come crawling back to us after it fails. And so, of course, by God's grace, it didn't fail. And we now have this system where regional conferences are such an important part of our church system. And so as far as, you know, what should we do structurally? Should we change our structure? I don't know the exact answer to that, because I think we have to start with there being some truth telling and some apologies by the church around why they created this system in the first place. And also some assurances for how Black leadership will be respected and maintained in any subsequent kind of a system. Because now, if the idea is just to remove regional conferences, well, then, you know, does that do away with, you know, the racism and the, the white flight that can lead to our churches on the local level just being segregated in and of themselves oftentimes. And how is that going to impact the way our leadership looks? And also, how do we finally, at some point, address all of the diverse persons that fall in between the white-black divide? It's almost like well, which side are you going to choose, or which, system are you going to align yourself with? Because we've never really, adequately addressed the conversation in general. And so I think that the church has to approach it from that kind of a perspective before we jump the gun immediately to questions about, let's just do away with this or that conference, because it's not going to change the underlying, undergirding realities that are under the surface of that system.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike. I mean, I know you're not a health professional, but a lot of this lack of apology and recognition of what has been done, and being able to say, hey, let's do something about this, to perhaps, hey, you can't make it up. You can't. But what, there's something that you should be able to do to just recognize your brother. And a lot of times, especially young people, we realize what's going on. We realize what's happening. We realize what the need is, and not seeing that our church does not address it creates a sense of bitterness in us. And this is why I'm saying, like, I know you're not a health professional, so maybe all these like feelings and things like that, it's hard to talk about, but this, seeing this growing bitterness towards the church because of the passiveness that we've had in moments like right now, with Floyd's murder, and not being able to stick together at a moment like this, or being quick enough to put out a statement and saying firmly where we stand and what we believe and what we are willing to do, or the other side of the coin, where we're quick to do those things without doing our homework, and just coming at it from a place of ignorance. And this builds up bitterness within the young people, that we come to a point where we don't really care about church anymore, because it doesn't reflect what it supposedly believes. And so I'm not asking you to speak to the mental health or the emotional health.
Sure.
But in your own story and through your own experience, going through exploring the law through the fair housing area, you saw a lot of this, and I'm sure that there was some ill feelings towards how the system was working against these people. And so my question is, how has Michael dealt with this temptation of growing bitter towards Adventism as a movement?
Yeah. I think it's a really important question, man, because and I actually have more questions than answers, in general, but in response to this as well. And I think this is where a lot of folks who are, millennials like me, or in Gen Z, if we're even paying attention to at any level to what's happening, within the church as it pertains to these issues, you're inevitably going to get deeply frustrated at times, and saddened, and those feelings are very real. And so I just don't want to minimize them at all. I want to affirm and acknowledge that I struggle with this too, working within our church system, at Andrews. That is a part of, I think often of the quote by the phenomenal author and poet James Baldwin, who said, to be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage. A constant state of rage. And I I've gone back to that a lot in recent months because I so often feel that rage. And sometimes for folks, rage is a scary word, but it's real, and we just need to affirm it and own it. And I think that being upset about something does mean that you do have some, what I'll call some skin in the game. It means that there is some sort of a passion and a love for what's for that institution or that system or whatever the case may be, because you wanted to be better, you wanted to look better, and because of that, when it falls short, it causes this frustration. Because if you didn't care at all, I don't think that you really get enraged or upset about it or disenchanted, because at that point, I mean, it just would be off your radar, entirely. And so, for me, how I handle that is, I always just remember to tell myself that, the work that I'm doing is about people. It's about our students. It's about, our fellow employees here. And, I think about the moments where, students or employees, maybe send, a quick message or a quick text, or the times when I've seen someone awaken to something and actually have a breakthrough, and where, they didn't really see it or think it was really that important when they started their journey at Andrews, but because of some engagement with our programs and things of that nature, they've awakened to understand some of these things better. That's a reminder to me that, the work that I'm doing does have value, and that it is having an impact. And so I think that, for folks who are frustrated, whether it's in your local church context or whatever the case may be, continuing to raise your voice and to speak up and to speak out, it is having an impact in some way. You may not see it right now. You may not see the fruits of it immediately. But I haven't been able to see some of the fruits of the work that I've done here until like in recent months. And I've been here for 3 years, early on in my tenure here, I was probably one of a few people that would say the phrase Black Lives Matter, at least that I knew of, who would say it publicly. But you fast forward 3 years, and on Juneteenth, 2020, our president, Dr. Luxton, is releasing an official statement from our university, emphatically declaring that all Black lives matter, and talking about the commitments that we've made and further commitments that we're making in order to make our institution a more inclusive place.
Wow.
Now, I would never take, the credit for that happening. The Spirit of God is awakening people in our community to the realities and the necessities of taking this work seriously and stepping into action. And I would not have been able to still be here and see that had I given up after year one, because there were definitely some frustrating and heart-wrenching conversations and situations that have been had during, my time here. But those are just some of the growing pains that are now starting to bear some good fruit. And so that work obviously continues. We're still at the very early stages of our process here. But hopefully that's encouragement to someone that, the work does have value. It does belong. God does see it, and he'll honor it. And the Spirit of God will awaken hearts and minds to the importance of this work.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you mentioned that to really give value to these small moments of victory that we have when someone reaches out to you and it's like, hey, man, you really impacted me, and and to see that, I'm going back to we just went through a series, and Thessalonians, and Paul is writing to the Thessalonians, and he's telling them, and what crown will I wear, and what will I glory? Is it not you, my brethren? And he's talking to, a small group of believers in Thessalonica. He's not talking to the whole city. The whole city didn't believe. It was just these small groups of people. And so even these small groups, as we get together, like right now in our homes, and we're watching this and we're having these open discussions, it is a time to grow together. I want to just go ahead and ask you just two more questions, Mike, if you have time.
Sure.
One is twofold, so that I could fit all three questions into two. I want to give a quick shout out to Maria. She's actually at work. I believe she's at work right now. She's in the medical field and one of our first responders and keeping us safe through this pandemic. And she's saying this, to which I'm going to add a second part to. She says, "What do you say to people who say, 'I had nothing to do with it. Why should I apologize? Why can't they get over it? Things are different now.'" And to that, adding, how do we respectfully, I guess, deal with people like this that are also prone to, having that slur or that remark of, of these small comments that are, microaggressions, really, or aggressions, period. How do we deal with people like that with respect, with this like love that Paul talks about, and people like this that ask these, ill-founded questions?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And Maria, thank you for your question, and thank you for your service as a first responder. I know that in Florida, and I know in Miami in particular, with COVID, it's really intense right now. So our prayers are with you. Our prayers are with you, Brian, your family, your whole church family.
Yes.
Because it's a serious disease, and a lot of folks have been impacted by it. And so, we're praying that you all get on the other side of this, hopefully sooner than later, for sure. Just really quickly, I just pulled up, because I think it's important to help folks understand that even at the very foundation of some of our founders in our church, there was this idea of, or this understanding that we had an obligation as persons in the church to be stewards of the positions of leadership that we've been given, and that we inherit oftentimes the wrongs of that have been done by those that have gone before us. Yeah. And so in the Review and Herald, January 21, 1896, Ellen White wrote this article entitled, "Am I my brother's keeper?" That was the question that she used as the name for the article. And I just want to read a section of it for you real quick. Of course, this is 1896, and slavery had been abolished in 1863. Well, of course, it wasn't until 2 years later in 1865 until the last enslaved persons were released. But so we're some years after slavery had ended now, just for context. And she says this: "The American nation owes a debt of love to the colored race, and God has ordained that they should make restitution for the wrong they have done them in the past." And then she continues, because, that sounds like, okay, yeah, America at this time has done that and they need to make restitution for it. That's important. But she continues and says, "Those who have taken no active part in enforcing slavery upon the colored people are not relieved from their responsibility of making special efforts to remove, as far as possible, the sure result of their previous enslavement." And so, it goes on from there. And this is a powerful article that I think everybody who's watching should check out. I'll drop it in our chat, Brian, if you want to link people to it so that they can check out the full version. But she's essentially saying there that, okay, because we'll hear this a lot. Well, slavery happened, years ago, and, I wasn't a slave owner. But she said that even if you haven't taken an active part in in creating or enforcing slavery, you still have the obligation to ensure that the sure results of previous enslavement is rooted out. And so we, of course, see that the legacy of slavery continued on much longer after slavery ended, whether it was through Jim Crow laws and segregation, of course, the civil rights era that combated against that. We then had the war on drugs, mass incarceration, the school to prison pipeline, all the different vestiges, and we now see during this more recent era from 2016 on how a lot of those old school versions of oppression have started to rear their ugly heads again.
Yeah.
So I go back to these words often because the words still cry out to us again that, yeah, slavery's ended. Yeah, I wasn't there when the church decided to segregate into different conferences, but that does not relieve me from the obligation to take an active effort in eradicating those systems and structures. And then the second part of your question was in regards to like microaggressions and
Yeah.
how we should respond to them and things of that nature. So I think that as it pertains to microaggressions, there are lots of resources out there that you can reference people to. So Daryl Wing Sue is he's written a few books on microaggressions, excuse me, and that can help folks, have a better context for how to identify them, how to respond to them, things of that nature. And so I'll concede by saying that, sometimes people are in a situation where there are power dynamics which, could at least in the moment prevent them from responding directly to that kind of a microaggression. And so I think that person should be free to navigate, when and how they respond to that kind of conduct. But I do think it's important to, of course, as much as possible, maybe if it's a follow-up, sort of very respectfully, maybe having a meeting with the person, if they're a supervisor, whatever the case may be, if there are policies within your institution which address some of those issues, you may want to reference them or things of that nature. Really, it's important on the front end to make sure that whatever organization or institution you're a part of, first of all, has some sort of policy around addressing issues of bias or things of that nature. And if they do, to then work with the necessary professionals within that organization to hold persons accountable for that conduct and behavior. Because, and I think that there are different levels, I guess, of aggressions, right? I mean, there are, I guess, actual microaggressions that are maybe, one in and of themselves is like sort of a smaller, thing that you may be able to brush off. But the thing about microaggressions is the cumulative effect of them building up, which can really have a deep impact on you. And so I think it's important in the early end of that, when it might be easier to just sort of say, hey, hey, when you said that, and and you may not have meant it that way, and I don't want to imply some intent here, but when you said that, it definitely rubbed me the wrong way, and here's why, and sort of give your personal explanation for why, and moving forward, I'd love it if we could try to communicate in a better way and perhaps give some examples of what that looks like, and hopefully on the early end of that interaction, you're able to nip it in the bud, because if you allow those to accumulate, it will have a compounding mental health and emotional health effect on you that'll be hard to sometimes it's hard to recover from, for sure.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And part of that also lies with the person that overhears this microaggression and goes on their day without saying anything either. Though it wasn't directed at you, you have a responsibility at least as we studied this morning, Romans chapter 13, you have a responsibility to do your neighbor no harm. And that
Yeah.
also includes the fact that you ought to be able to say that not only are you not doing your neighbor harm, but you're also not allowing others to do harm to your neighbor as well.
Right.
Standing up for each other
Right.
and be here. And I love that you mentioned that. Last question, and we'll let you go here, Mike. I know is probably waiting for you. The question refers to, now that we're going, especially Miami, as you said, is going through this COVID crisis, and
Yeah.
changed, the way that we interact and can tangibly serve in our community. So how can we be inclusive in a time like this?
It's a great question. I mean, I think, having more conversations like this one, I think is a really important way to do that. I know that a lot of, local, maybe city hall or town hall meetings that would normally happen in person, a lot of those things are happening virtually. And so if you want to, get engaged with the pulse of what is being talked about in your city, in your local community, it's in some ways more accessible now that it's virtual. I'd say also, maybe think about different nonprofits in your area that are working, to address some of these different issues, particularly in a spot like Miami. I'm sure that there are a number that are engaged in different facets of the work. And so just finding ways to sort of engage with them and to support and provide whatever resources you can, from your church and things of that nature. Also, maybe sometimes doing just a general audit of the members who are in your church. Because, I mean, I'm sure that, there are members of your church that are actively engaged with lots of different things, within the community. And sometimes it's just a matter of everyone kind of coming together, whether it's on a Zoom and just saying, well, hey, I have this thing going on, or I have this thing going on. And then you're able to see, oh, wow, like we have a lot of our members are even engaged in a lot of this work already. How can we empower them more to provide the resources they need to take that work further? And I think ultimately, again, coming full circle, just having these kinds of spaces, safe, open spaces for dialogue, so that your members can feel as if they're being heard and they can be empowered to, again, do justice to love, mercy, and to walk humbly before their God in real tangible ways. So yeah, those are some suggestions that I would provide there.
Love it, Mike. Man, dude, I wish I could be there with you, man. Give you a hug.
Yeah, likewise, bro. Well, maybe not there right now. But
yeah, don't come over here, man. Don't come over here. But I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really just one way, because I was just like, hey, tell me about this. And you were swinging them, man, left and right out of the park. And I really appreciate your help and your words that just, I hope it inspired those who are listening. And if you're out there, if you want to get to know more about this, we put the link for the Ellen White. Listen, play back this one more time. See where it is that you need to work in yourself so that you can serve better. And also, jot down some of those notes. The authors that Mike gave about, microaggressions. Make sure you get that and be able to be a better servant, because you have more knowledge to do so. And Michael, again, thank you so much, man. And we're going to say goodnight to you here as we go into our last worship song for the evening, and then say goodbye.
Yeah, well, Brian, thanks again for having me on, bro. Love you, man. And, love this conversation and opportunity to dialogue with you. And again, I'll just repeat, our prayers are with you and your church, as well as, just the city of Miami in general and the state of Florida as you all are navigating COVID. And whatever I can do to continue to help with this conversation in particular, just let me know, bro. And I'd love to do it. And so thanks again for the invitation, and we'll continue to be in touch.
the love is mutual, and thank you for accepting this little challenge.
Sure, no
Yeah.
problem.
Have a good one, man. Bye.
Peace.
Letting go of every single dream, I lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I try to win this war, I confess. My hands are weary, I need your rest. Mighty warrior, king of the fight. No matter what I face, you're by my side. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings. There's not a day ahead you have not seen. So in all things be my life and breath. I want what you want, Lord, and nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. You are my strength and comfort. You are my steady hand.
You are my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand.
Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good.
There's not a place where I'll go you've not already stood.
When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. 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 I will trust in you.
So I hope this conversation helped you to be able to really explore what it is like to not only trust God, not only to be able to rely on Him, but to also take the initiative and be able to look at these beliefs and these columns that really built Adventism and really see them for what they are: reasons to really serve your neighbor, reasons to really create a vision in which you can see through these lenses of service what it is like to be there for people that perhaps don't share your physical attributes or don't share your own specific beliefs. And so may this have helped you to grow as a person, to grow as a disciple, to grow as a follower of Christ, which means to be able to accept those unlike us and to be able to serve them as though you are serving Jesus, our Lord and Master. Have a wonderful night, and make sure to check out our series that's coming up on the book of Amos. We're going to continue tackling justice and mercy and love and what it's like to live justly, to live here in Miami and to serve our neighbor. So continue to keep posted with us on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Facebook. And view our website, www.miamitemple.org, to stay connected, stay informed. Tomorrow morning and in the afternoon, there's going to be several Sabbath schools. This is a time for us to be inclusive. Go out, be part of a small group, be part of a Sabbath school, so that you can stay connected with people, you can socialize. Even if it is virtually, it's a time to come together. And Miami Temple, we pride ourselves in being a multicultural church. And so get to know other cultures tomorrow. Have a great Sabbath. Have a good night. And please rest up.